Who else wishes that safety car came out about 5 to 10 laps earlier? The talk was all about grid penalties again, the fact that many drivers were going to be starting well out of position, and up and down the grid we were going to see so many strategy battles, and on top of that, it's Italy. We've seen Leclerc, Gasly, Ricciardo win here in the last few seasons. It was set to be box office. But the Italian Grand Prix was just a little bit tame this year, although we still do have 3 winners and 3 losers to talk about, so let's jump straight into it. Is there anywhere else I could have started other than the fairy tale debut from Nick de Vries? Coming in for a Friday practice with Aston Martin looked to be the peak of Nick de Vries' Formula 1 season until all of a sudden Alex Albon was taken ill with appendicitis early on Saturday morning, meaning that the Dutch Formula 2 and Formula E former champion had to step into that Williams seat. Sitting alongside Nicholas Latifi, who let's not forget has been in that Williams seat for 3 seasons now, and also taking a drive in the slowest team on the Formula 1 grid, looked like it could have been a tricky weekend for Nick. But Nick showed exactly why he is always rumoured for Formula 1 seats whenever they become available. He had a tremendous race. Yes, I know he benefited from the grid drops of others, but considering he said himself he was nowhere near the fitness level required for a full weekend of Formula 1 action, he did incredibly well. He tagged along at the back of that midfield pack of Norris, Gasly, Ricciardo for the entirety of the Grand Prix and did really well to keep up with those drivers, picking up a 9th place finish in the end. This now puts Nick de Vries in 20th place in the driver's standings for the Formula 1 2022 season and drops Nicholas Latifi down to 21st place for the second time this year. With Alex Albon looking like he's going to be available to return for the Singapore Grand Prix, it looks like that might be the end of Nick de Vries driving for 2022, although there are rumours circulating that the Dutchman has put himself in the shop window not only to replace Nicholas Latifi, but for a possible Alpine seat in 2023. After this weekend, I'd absolutely love to see more of Nick de Vries in Formula 1. He's a Formula 2 and Formula E champion for a reason, although if he is going to be taking a seat in Formula 1 next year, needs to start work on those shoulders early. And as the team that Nick drove for on Friday that are my first losers this time around, it's Aston Martin. Both drivers were unable to finish the Grand Prix with power unit failures being their issue. Sebastian Vettel came to a stop first, and then just a few laps later, Lance Stroll joined him. It's a frustrating weekend for the team as they seem to be making progress since the summer break. But with this weekend's result, you can see they slip even further away from AlphaTauri in 8th place in the Constructors' Championship. But when teams at that end of the table only really have the chance to pick up 3 or 4 points on a perfect weekend, the hopes of catching either Haas in 7th place or AlphaTauri in 8th are looking less and less likely. Even though Aston Martin came out earlier in the season and said they were focusing on 2023 as a priority, I still think they would have hoped for a little bit more of a competitive end to 2022 in the Constructors' Championship. And on the note of championships, our second winner has to be the man who made it 11 wins from 16 races this season. It's Max Verstappen. It's getting to the point now where it feels inevitable that Max Verstappen will win every single Grand Prix regardless of where he starts on the grid. Not only was this his 11th win of the season, it was also his 5th win in a row, and after another grid drop for replacing his ICE. With this win, he's been able to elongate his lead at the top of the driver's standings, and on top of that, he is now mathematically able to win this championship in Singapore. If he continues in this form, he is on to break an incredible amount of Formula 1 records. He could equal the earliest championship win, he could get the most wins in a season, the most points in a season by an absolute landslide, and if you want to know how he could do all that, I'll link to the video I made last week all about it in the description down below. Back to the Italian Grand Prix itself though, and it was another dominant display from 7th place. He made up positions off of the start and then stuck to his strategy even when Ferrari were gambling with Leclerc. It paid off though as the Dutchman was able to keep the Ferrari a considerable distance behind, and a late safety car guaranteed the victory. There's not much more we can say about Max Verstappen this season. He is absolutely dominating every single Grand Prix at this point. Then there's our next loser, who has to be Nicholas Latifi, because he's doing the absolute opposite of dominating. Whatever the opposite of dominating is what Nicholas Latifi is doing right now. Latifi is now just one of 2 drivers not to pick up points this season, and the other was Nico Hülkenberg in an absolutely terrible Aston Martin car at the start of the season. And I know that Williams are trying to keep him on board and trying to entice him to do better over the course of the season by saying that there's a possibility that he should stay on for 2023, but honestly, that should just be completely gone now. Now, I know that the Williams car is not the quickest car on the grid. In fact, 99% of the time, it's by far and away the slowest car on the grid. But we've seen from Alex Albon this season, and now Nick de Vries as well, that there is pace to be extracted out of that car on particular tracks, but it's just never seen with Nicholas Latifi. And people will throw out the performances when he got to Q3 in Silverstone or when he put in the fastest lap in Hungary in the wet. But he started the season incredibly poorly with many crashes and incidents over the first few Grand Prix. And these are mistakes that we shouldn't be seeing from a driver in his third year in Formula One with the same team in Formula One as well. I'll hold my hands up and say that coming into this season, I thought Nicholas Latifi might level up a little bit. I thought Alex Albon might have a little bit of pressure put on him by Nicholas Latifi, but that just has not happened in any way whatsoever. And Nicholas Latifi is now facing criticism from people saying that Nick de Vries should even take over his seat for the rest of the 2022 season, which I don't think will happen. But if Williams are serious about getting better in the future and lifting themselves off the bottom of the Constructors' Championship by a considerable margin now at this point, I think that they need to replace Nicholas Latifi for 2023. There is no way that the Canadian should stay in Formula One. Another man who might be on the move for the 2023 season, although I think will stay in Formula One next year, is our next winner, Pierre Gasly. And I'm going to be called biased in the comments down below for putting Pierre Gasly in my winners category. And do you know what? I probably am a little bit biased. It wasn't the best weekend in the world from Pierre Gasly, but it was points to the AlphaTauri man, and I want to celebrate it. Pierre Gasly's had a pretty torrid time in that AlphaTauri car over the season so far. Not many opportunities have arisen for him to really show his quality over the course of the season. Thinking back to 2021, Pierre Gasly was extracting an incredible amount of pace, especially in qualifying out of that AlphaTauri car. And this season, I don't think it's really been his fault. The AlphaTauri car just really hasn't quite suited him. It's taken him a little while to get used to it. And it seems that AlphaTauri car is very track dependent. We have to remember the last time they had a really good weekend was Azerbaijan, another racetrack with many straights. But a P5 start for the Frenchman, yes, of course, he gained some positions because of those grid penalties, but then finishing P8, picking up points in that AlphaTauri car and putting on a good battle with Lando Norris, Daniel Ricciardo throughout the entire Grand Prix. I just really enjoyed seeing Pierre Gasly in a competitive car, showing what he's able to do again. And the fact that he was able to do it in Monza, the Grand Prix that he won a few years ago, the home Grand Prix of AlphaTauri as well, it was just the cherry on top of an incredible Sunday for Pierre. Last but not least, my third and final loser of the Grand Prix this weekend is the FIA and the race directors. And it's not because I think they did too much wrong in this Grand Prix, it's because they showed the correct thing to do in this kind of situation that maybe they should have done a few Grand Prix ago. Of course, I'm alluding to the questions that were brought up after what happened in Abu Dhabi last year. And I don't want the Hamilton versus Verstappen debate to reignite itself. I'm not a fan of either of the drivers. I would have personally liked either of them to win the World Championship. It would have made no difference to me. But the fact that all of the protocols were followed this time around in Monza made last time in Abu Dhabi feel even more questionable. On top of that, the communication between the stewards on the day and the fans that are there and watching at home is still lacking in places for me. There were many people speculating around red flags and standing starts, which should have been just cut short. The fact that there isn't any communication between the fans and the stewards to understand why these decisions are being made at the time is just boggling to me. To be fair, I think it was the correct decision to end the race under the safety car. Seeing that crane on track with the Formula One cars at the same time made me really uncomfortable. Overall, this hopefully shows that they're taking steps forward, but the criticism is always going to be there about what happened last season, and the fact that obviously that was reignited by this Grand Prix is a definite L for the Formula One stewards. Some honourable mentions from this weekend's Italian Grand Prix, starting with Zhou Guanyu. I was so close to putting him in a winners category, picking up another point in that Alfa Romeo. I was so happy for the Chinese driver. On top of that, I think it was a good weekend for McLaren overall. Lando Norris again finishing best of the rest, and Daniel Ricciardo would have probably finished in the points had it not been for that DNF towards the end of the Grand Prix, which would have really put another nail in the coffin for Alpine this weekend. They were definite losers, not picking up any points from the Italian Grand Prix. And my final loss of the weekend has to go to Kevin Magnussen. He started 16th, finished in 16th, and looked nowhere near the pace, even getting overtaken by Mick Schumacher. That about rounds up my winners and losers from the Italian Grand Prix weekend. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Have I missed anyone really obvious for the winners and losers from this weekend's Grand Prix? Whilst you're down there, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, check out that Max Verstappen video as well if you want to see the records that he could break going into the Singapore Grand Prix, and I'll see you next time.
Well done, Max. That's you deserve that victory. It's a shame it didn't get going at the end there, but you know, you were the fastest car all weekend, so well done, mate.